City Council meeting of March 2nd to order. If you'll rise and join us for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, has council had an opportunity to review the meeting minutes from February 16th? If so, I'll ask for a motion to approve.
I will make a motion to approve the minutes from February 16th.
I'll second.
Motion from Robin, second from Becky. Any discussion on them? With none, those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Any changes to the agenda this evening? None. I'll ask for a motion to approve the set agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda is presented.
I'll second that.
Motion from Rick, second from Robin. Those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Guests in open forum. We have two presentations today from Sherburne County COVID-19 update with Ms. Larson.
Hi, good evening.
Welcome.
Thanks for taking the time. My name is Amanda Larson. I serve as the Health and Human Services Director at Sherburne County. Our commissioners get a COVID update every board meeting. I keep hoping that I'm going to run out of things to talk about and they won't call on me, but every few weeks it seems like something new or different or something changes. So particularly as we move forward with vaccinations, it's a very tight timeline. Things are always changing. New guidance is always coming. And so we really realize that we need to be more intentional with our communication, both with our partners as well as residents, because there's a lot of confusion out there in terms of who's getting vaccinated, who's not, and what the prioritization and decision-making process looks like. Also early in our COVID response, we really worked hand in hand with our city partners. Communication was great, and then life happened and we all got busy, and I think we realized that there's a deficit that we really need to be connecting with our city partners more, because our elected officials are peppered with questions all the time on this subject, and I'm sure you are as well. And so just wanted to reach out. It's very timely too right now, because our county administrator Messelt has been sending out the COVID bulletins, which I think you also got attached to the city council packet. So this is just more of a narrative and information behind that. So I hope that you've seen this before, but this is our COVID dashboard. It is found on our county COVID page. There's a lot of information on our county COVID page. So how I find this is I usually just Google Sherburne County COVID-19 dashboard. This information is updated every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 a.m. And again, you'll see confirmed cases, cases off isolation, so beyond the 14-day period, total deaths, and then the vaccination totals, as well as some city information in terms of how many COVID cases are here. Up until vaccinations came at the first of the year, this was really the information that everybody was looking at, because this is the information that the governor was using to make his decisions based on if students are learning in person or distance learning. And I know you guys have been very fortunate here in Becker, where your superintendent was able to keep most of your little learners in person, and so that's awesome. We have been meeting weekly with our superintendents probably since early August, and we just made the decision last week that we can go to a monthly cadence now, which is awesome. Kids are back in school, teachers who want one are vaccinated, and we're crossing our fingers that this trend continues because it's a healthy one. So in terms of who's getting vaccinated, and again, this changes all the time. This graphic is new as of last week. The priority is still 1A. So really that 1A priority is categorized kind of into 3 tiers. So it's really our EMS, first responders, healthcare workers, and that really includes personal care attendants, folks in dentist's office, chiropractic offices, and now it just includes waiver clients as of 340 today. And so again, that priority every time we think we're done keeps expanding, and so it's kind of a revolving door in terms of our 1A population. In terms of most of who's getting vaccinated now, it's our educators as well as our 65 and older population. We don't have authorization to move beyond that group yet. We want to, especially last week and this week. We know that all of our educators in Sherburne County who want a vaccine have been offered a vaccine, and we're thinking that that 65 and older actually might be saturated now. But again, we have to wait till NDH's head nod to move beyond that group and to other priority groups. This is the vaccine dashboard that the state put out, and so I highlighted this because you'll see the statewide information kind of toward the right, and then you'll see Sherburne County. So our percentage of our total county population that has received 1 dose of vaccine is not even at 10% yet, and we're actually the lowest in the state. This isn't a reflection on anybody who's doing the vaccinations. Really, it's based on our allocations from MDH, because they're really the ones dictating that. Now also keep in mind that this is our total county population, and roughly 1/3 of our county is under the age of 18, so not eligible for a vaccine. So you kind of got to take that information into the equation. I'll just speak for local public health. We receive allocations usually of 200 to 300 doses per week, and now we have the second doses also added into that mix. Last week we got a allocation of 1,000. This week we got an allocation of 500, so that's slowly increasing, so we think that that's good news. And again, this is yesterday's data, but in terms of Sherburne County, a little over 9,000 individuals have gotten their first dose, and then 4,176 have gotten the full series of 2 doses. Johnson & Johnson was just approved yesterday, and so that's the single dose vaccine. Otherwise, the ones that are on the market right now are both the 2-dose vaccine. This is kind of a comparison of the statewide data and then our county data. So statewide, about 16% of the population has received 1 dose of the vaccine, and then 8% with 2 doses. And again, you'll see that Sherburne County is pretty significantly under that. The area that I'm paying closest attention to is the bottom bar graphs in terms of who is 65 and older that has received at least 1 dose. The governor said last week that he will not move on to the next priority group until at least 75% of the 65 and older group is vaccinated with 1 dose. And so when we're at 40%, and when we're finding that our market is pretty well saturated, we're really kind of putting that back in the governor's court to say we need to move on. We've got folks with underlying health conditions and other priority populations like our correction officers and social workers who have not been able to be vaccinated yet. So that decision really lies at the state. This is telling for us, maybe not other people, but the federal allocations are now being determined on how fast you can move vaccine. So the state has put the guidelines for everybody who's administering vaccine, which includes local public health, the state, hospitals, clinics, pharmacies, that from the time of receipt, you have 72 hours to get 90% of your vaccine into the arms of your residents, and then 7 days to get 100% of vaccine. If you're not meeting those benchmarks, then you risk future allocations. So Sherburne County has received, is getting 100% of our vaccine out within 72 hours. This is not as easy as one might think. Normally, our allocation notification comes Friday afternoon, conveniently, usually Friday after business hours. And so then we have the weekend to determine who and how we're vaccinating the next week. Usually our vaccine actually doesn't come until Tuesday morning. For some reason this week it came it's coming Wednesday morning, and so it really kind of puts us into a scramble. So a lot of times our clinics are Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, again, trying to squish it in to meet those 72-hour benchmarks. But isn't that just COVID? Everything's a scramble and everything's unknown. So Sherburne had our first clinic on December 26th. Since that time, we've had 17 clinics. We've administered a little over 3,000 first doses, 700 second doses, for a total of 3,770 doses of vaccine. You remember the Sherburne County numbers that I just showed you on the dashboard. Sherburne County Public Health is only responsible for, we've only administered about 28% of all vaccine in our county. So other vaccine sites are clinics, hospitals, Walmart, Walgreens, some different pharmacies that are getting it as well. And right now, the question on everybody's mind is, how do I get signed up? How will I be notified? When is my priority group? It's as clear as mud, and again, changing all the time. So pretty early on in the vaccine response, we launched a COVID interest form on our county website. Again, there's a lot of information on our county website, so I usually just Google Sherburne County COVID interest form and fill that out. And then that's really how we're determining who to send the link to when appointments are available. Now, I would say almost every clinic or hospital or public health agency who's administering vaccine has a list like that, but the state still decided 2 weeks ago to launch their own vaccine connector. Still unclear how that intersects with our clinics. I'm making the assumption that that's really feeding their statewide sites. Regardless, we are asking folks that if you are looking for a vaccine, to put your name on every and all lists. And so, for instance, if you're an educator and somehow you miss the boat through our communication with our superintendents, put your name on the state vaccine connector, and you'll probably get notification on one of the statewide sites. And we are directing everybody to our COVID-19 hotline. We've had to beef up staffing for this, but again, for folks who have COVID questions, folks that want to report non-compliance with COVID, but really for folks wanting to make an appointment, wanting to switch an appointment, wanting to find out when their second dose is, there's always our COVID hotline where we're directing folks to have questions too. And so that's a high-level overview of what we're doing with vaccinations, and just wanting to know if anybody has any questions.
Question?
Please.
So you had mentioned that you talked about the current population that you were serving potentially being saturated already. How do you determine that? And what if, I guess, do you also, the second part of that question would be, what do you do for folks who have refused the shot? So let's say 40% have it, another 30% refuse it. I mean, that's 70 between the two that have been offered, but how do you do, you're gonna probably get to a point where a decent chunk of people have refused the vaccine, they've been offered it. Are you keeping track of that?
Yep, that question was probably my 3 o'clock question to MDH. When we had our first 65 and older clinic a few weeks ago, we had 100 appointments available. Those were filled in 5 minutes, and most people aren't just sitting by their computers waiting for an email. We really made some assumptions last week with our 1,000 dose week. We know that we had educators, and what we found is a lot of the educators were already getting vaccinated. A lot of our Becker folks were getting vaccinated by Centricare Monticello. And so when those spots didn't fill immediately, we then opened it up to our 65 and older population. There are 4,000 people on our list right now who have filled out the county COVID interest form. And so we sent that email kind of in groups of 500, but eventually to all 4,000 people there's probably 700 appointments. And we got them filled, but it was tough to get them filled, which kind of took us back. This week, again, 500. We did a little more boots on the ground outreach, really connecting with faith communities, the Council on Aging. And when I left today, we still had 200 appointments for Thursday and Friday. So my question to MDH is, we need to move vaccine within 72 hours. You're telling me I can't move on to our priority population, so I'm going to sit on it and risk future allocation. Give me some guidance how you'd like to proceed. Because personally, I have a vested interest in getting our social workers, our community correction agents, and our jail folks vaccinated, and I'd love to be able to move on to them. That 75% that the governor had said is assuming that all 65-year-olds want to get vaccinated. We know that group, there's a very high number that want to be vaccinated, but I don't know how many that is. So to be determined on that.
What is the shelf life when you receive a vaccine? What, not necessarily from the state, but what is the actual shelf life?
Yeah, great question. The vaccine that we're getting public health is Moderna. So that's a freezer one, not the ultra cold like the Pfizer one. And so it can be frozen for up to 6 months, refrigerated once we de-thaw it. I think it's a week maybe a little bit over. But once we puncture the vial, it's only good for 6 hours. So a lot of times in one of those vials, there's 10 doses. So if we have no shows, if folks get declined for any number of reasons, that's when we're pulling in our standby list. Up until last week, our standby list had been the 65 and olders or the educators, and now we're starting to pull in some of our correction agents. For our standby list, we do have authorization to kind of move beyond those priority groups.
So you could potentially, like these 200 that you're saying, I mean, if you get to Thursday morning and
I don't know, because those are real appointments, so I'm really looking for guidance from the state. I'm a rule follower. I don't want to risk future allocations because I'm jumping over what MDH has said we are able to do, so that's the situation I'm in now. We'll see. Anybody else have any questions? All right. If not, you have our information, COVID hotline, and again, if you're encountering any citizens that do have questions, just direct them to that COVID hotline, and we'd be happy to answer the information, because like I said, the game changes all the time, so.
Thank you. All right, and next we'll welcome Jeanette Bernhardt, who will give us the annual presentation from the Great River Regional Library.
Can I slide this off?
I-
Sorry. Madam Mayor, members of the council, thank you for letting me speak tonight. My name is Jeanette Burkhart, and I am the Library Services Coordinator for the Becker and Big Lake Public Libraries. I'm just going to quickly review the year of 2020 with you and what the library managed to accomplish in that year, despite COVID. In-person events before closing on March 16th, we had 17 in-person events with 251 participants. After that point, we were not allowed to do in-person programming, and so we moved to more of a self-directed take and make kit program. We had 41 different take and make kits go out with 470 people having a kit at some point during this year. The winter reading program finished up before COVID hit in March, so we had 50 participants, which is adults and teens, with the winter reading program. And I'll talk a little bit more about the summer reading program later, but the theme was dig deeper, read, investigate, and discover. And Brent and I had a great plan that got squashed, but that's okay. We'll do it again. So we had 262 kids and 59 teens. Overall, participation for last year was actually up 19%. From 2019, and I think a lot of that had to do with parents were done with their kids being on computers and wanted physical things in their hands, which the library was able to provide. So the library was affected by COVID-19 just like any other business in the world. We closed on March 16th under direction actually of the city of Becker because the community center closed. The library system itself did not actually close until 6 p.m. on March 16th, but the Becker Library closed that day. Officially, the library reopened for grab-and-go services in June, but the Becker Library was part of a pilot for curbside pickup. So 5 libraries, including Becker, were allowed to reopen on April 13th with the cooperation of the staff from the community center. We were able to be open 2 days a week for about 4 hours each day, to allow people to come to the library and pick up requested items that had been sitting on the hold shelf since March when we closed. So we cleaned off the hold shelf and then slowly were able to have people request items just from the Becker Library because we knew that those things had been sitting and were clean. And as our delivery system started to open back up, we were able to allow requests from other libraries. Again, that was still all curbside. Into May, we started to reopen the library to allow people to come in by reservation to pick up any requested items or to use the computer very quickly, or to even browse too. And then in June, we were able to have all of those services available with limitations of the masks being required, the time limit of 1 hour in the library, and then capacity limit of 29 people at one time. I included in the board packet a task analysis for the Dropbox or the book return, outside book return, which is where we are only taking returned items at this time. And I included that for the reason just to show you that each step that we took, the library system took to reopen, was very thought out and very intentional, because we wanted to keep our staff and patrons safe. So books that are coming back into the library at that time had to quarantine for 3 days before we actually checked them back in. So you can probably imagine the calls we would get from people saying, hey, I returned this on Monday and it is Wednesday and it's still on my account. And we would have to explain, that's because it's in quarantine. You won't receive a fine. Any fines that you were received during that quarantine period or up through June, we waived. Also during that spring period of time, we opened up our online card requests or card applications. We've actually had online card applications for about 1.5 years, but you had to be 17 or older to be able to request an online card. So during the spring, we actually opened that up to all ages. The only difference between an online card and a physical card is that the online card only gives you access to the digital library platforms and the databases that the library purchases. You can still look at the library physical library catalog and request items, but once you come into the library to pick up those items, we have to give you a physical card, and that opens up all the privileges of the library then. So because we weren't able to have in-person programming, we had to be a little creative. We did still host the summer reading program for ages 0 to 17, but instead of the library having a slip that showed 5 hours of reading, the kids were able to choose their own challenges and own goals. So they could pick up a goal minute that they wanted to read to. They could pick a number of books. They could pick number of pages, or they could pick an activity that they designed that involved reading. And that's how they finished the program that year. We also used Beanstack, which is our online tracking app. And this was the first time we used Beanstack with the summer reading program, but it tracks minutes, it tracks books that you've read, and each time you meet the challenge or complete an activity in Beanstack, you earn an electronic badge. During the summer, I said we had take and makes, and we had those on Tuesdays and Thursdays, mostly geared to preschool and school-age kids at that time. A couple of examples were items for a sink or float water play. We had paper windsocks. We had rockets for the 4th of July. We had popsicle stick catapults and bird feeders. That was just to name a few. On Tuesdays, which is typically our story time day, we tried to keep that routine going for parents that had preschoolers. We would put out a story stroll along the sidewalk and the path that's in front of the community center. And if you don't know what a story stroll is, you may have heard the term story walk, which is trademarked. And it is basically taking pages from a book and inserting them into sometimes very permanent pedestals with plexiglass and everything to protect the pages. Ours are just very simple laminated book pages that we've posted on Coroplast and set on an H-frame, the metal H-frames that we stick into the ground. And then it encourages that physical activity and literacy at the same time as families are walking down the path. You see them in parks a lot. In August, we played back to school bingo. And because we couldn't do it in person, we would post 10 bingo calls on the windows of the library or in the library. And kids could pick up their bingo card, mark off the bingo calls, and when they got a bingo, they could come into the library and pick up their prizes. The prizes were back to school items, so notebooks, crayons, markers. We had 86 participants play bingo with us. Once school started, we continued the take and make crafts, but we tried to expand the age groups, so we didn't include just kids. We started opening it up to teens and adults. And we also started take home story times in September, which is pretty much what it sounds like. We pick a theme and pull those books from the shelves in Becker, and then we include a craft and a coloring sheet that are based on that theme. And we have a special shelf for all that stuff is located so parents can come in and check those books out, grab the craft, and do story time at home with their child. In September, we, being the library staff, decided we wanted to show the people that were using the library some appreciation. And because we couldn't do a big customer appreciation style event, we came up with Patron Appreciation Fridays. And we kicked September off with the DVD collection. So if you were in the library and you checked out a DVD with some other items, we gave you a package of microwave popcorn. And then we kind of rotated through some of the other collections of the library in different months. So in October, I think we highlighted mystery novels, and you received a coupon for a free drink from the Caribou in Clearwater. In December, we highlighted cookbooks, and then you received recipe cards. So those are just a couple of examples of what we did. In November, we started looking at wanting to reach out to people that weren't using the library or that were having a hard time getting there, and how we could connect with them. So we are collaborating with the Becker Food Shelf, and we take over these take and make crafts that again have all the necessary materials to create a craft. It has an activity sheet, which could be a word find or a crossword puzzle, a coloring sheet, and then a donated book from the Friends of the Library. And then we take those completed kits over to the food shelf, and the food shelf becomes the distribution point for us, and they hand them out to the people that want them. If we look back at the monthly statistics for 2020, the Becker Library gained ground every month. So from the time that we opened in April with curbside to the time that we ended in December, we gained ground every month. You can see the increase in circulation each month. Not only that, but we started to see June beat May, and July beat June. So we started to see that trend as well. In October and December, we not only beat the previous month's circulation, but we saw that we were beating that same month in 2019. I think that we probably would have been on pace to do the same in November, but then the community center closed again, and not many people actually see the library and community center as two separate entities because the library stayed open during that time that the community center closed. October, we saw a 5.6% increase over 2019. In December, we saw a 9.5% increase over December of 2019. We still ended the month, however, at a decrease of 27.7%, but we won't dwell on that. The digital library saw its highest circulation since we started our digital collection with the platform Overdrive. In 2020, we had two digital platforms, actually. We had Overdrive and Access 360. We added the streaming service Hoopla. Hoopla is a pay-per-use service, so patrons are allowed to download 4 items from Hoopla per month, and Hoopla has music, movies, ebooks, e-audiobooks, all with no waiting. Over the year, we have heard many comments from people using the library that they are thankful that we have been open, that we're glad they were glad that we had things for kids to do that didn't involve electronic devices, and some people have even told us they did not know what they would do if the library had not been open. I want to give thanks to the city of Becker for seeing, and the community center staff for realizing that the part the library plays and its services play in the health and well-being of the community, and allowing the library to be open and remain open during this difficult time. So a quick rundown of statistics for 2020. Overall, we searched just under 41,000 items, which is down almost 16,000 items from 2019. But even though we were down, people still averaged checking out 6 items per visit to the library. Even though we waived fines for a short period of time, we still had some people that had fines on their cards later in the year, and we honored the Read Down Your Fines program that we have, where if you read for 15 minutes in the library, we waive $1 of your fine. We allowed people to do that from home on the honor system, and so we still waived $108.35. That was above and beyond anything that we waived for COVID. Any questions? Sure.
Will you guys be accepting items donated anytime soon?
For the Friends of the Library, we have started accepting some items, yes. I do not know when the Friends of the Library will have their next book sale. That is still kind of up in the air because they tend to use the meeting rooms in the community center, and those are not available at this time.
How about the story strolls? Will those continue? Is that a program? Okay.
Yes, once the ground thaws out a little bit, we'll get the story strolls back up, and we are looking at adding more story strolls this next year, so we'll have some different choices.
Good.
You had said that you were down like 15,000.
Mm-hmm.
Can you put that into a percentage?
27.7%.
How many, percentage-wise, how much were you, I guess what I'm getting at was usage up while you were open?
I can't say that usage was up except for October and December over the previous year. I could see we were gaining ground each month that we were open. So we started down like 50% in March or April when we opened and made ground up to be at 27.7% at the end of the year.
It was being used more than,
When you talk about not being able to do the in-person groups, is that something from the state, or what, I guess, where is that restriction coming from?
All of our restrictions are based on CDC and Minnesota Department of Health guidelines. The in-person restrictions, or the restrictions that they're putting on in-person programming is very labor intensive for us, and we just don't have the staff to be able to do that. Even if we tried to do an outdoor program, the direction is that you have a specific in to the arena that you're going to be using for your program, then those people still have to be 6 feet apart, and then you have a specific out when the program is done. And we just don't have the people to be able to police all of that. We're hoping by the fall, but it's anybody's guess at this point. Any other
Right, well,
questions?
thank you very much.
You're welcome. Can I put a quick plug in though?
Absolutely.
March is the library's annual fundraising month. The Becker Library is looking to raise $500 to be able to purchase prizes for the summer reading program and to help replenish supplies for more take and make kits as we go through the year. We're also looking to start saving for a non-traditional circulation item that I cannot say at this time because I still haven't gotten approval for it. But
It's non-traditional.
that's right. So I will leave some donation forms on the back table. But I also wanted to let you know that we are partnering with Pebble Creek Golf Course, and on March 21st, please come out and enjoy some food and drink at the golf course because they will be donating 10% of their sales that day to the library through the locally grown program. So,
That's wonderful.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for guests and open forum? Both very good presentations this evening. Wow, excellent. We'll go ahead and move on to committee reports. Would Budget and Finance like to go first?
We met on the 18th. We went over the financials, which was only January, so not a lot to look at. We briefly discussed an assessment policy that we did not find a lot of support for. The unemployment update was not in yet, so we're still waiting on that. And AR is in good shape and up to date. And on the 21st, at our Budget and Finance meeting, 21st of April, we will be getting the audit presentation.
All right. Would you like to do LPI as well?
To do LPR, do you want to do it?
actually, I did not make the LPI meeting.
All right.
I was not able to make it.
You were on the phone with me, I saw you. I've got it. We met on February 17th. They updated us on some of their capital projects. Yeah, capital improvement projects, where they were at. Mike was there. I watched him. And then we updated them on some of the road projects that may impact them. And we also spoke about the proposed increase into the water treatment facility. And they will be setting a date to sit down and have that new proposal presented to them.
All right.
That was about it.
And they're gonna offer a tour for council members.
They did offer, yes, as soon as they can.
When it warms up.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good. Joint Powers Fire Board.
Okay, so we met on the 22nd. It was pretty quick. What did we talk about? We talked about we got a $4,000 donation from the Eddy Foundation. So that was great. And of course, we were talking about the new truck that's coming. It's getting closer and closer. And that's about it.
The purchase of the hydraulic tools. that
Yes,
go
the
on truck.
hydraulics. Yes.
And we're not doing the hydraulic, it's the battery.
Battery one. Mhm. Yes.
Yes, due to, they're able to like go further away from the truck for safety wise. So.
Oh, cool.
All right, Planning Commission.
Planning Commission, we also met on the 22nd. It was more of a update, so we had talked about the housing RFP, which we are familiar with. And we also talked about the finance, the goals, actions, that's for the comp plan, that's coming at the finance piece of it, that had come through there as well. And we had an update on the comp plan, and yeah, it was pretty much, it was a lighter meeting for planning commission purposes, so.
All right. How about golf committee?
Golf committee, we went through our finances. The revenue was down a bit this year because of, we were closed for 11 days in January. We weren't allowed to be open. The real thing that we were at the meeting for was to see our preliminary plans for the expansion, which didn't arrive. So we just discussed some of the food issues and did a little taste test, and that was it.
And the open house is what?
And we discussed open house.
Yeah, the 27th from 10 to 3.
We did also in the past discuss this with the library coming up and where they'll be supplying volunteer staff to help in the restaurant is where they get their donation from.
How about joint planning?
We met on the 22nd, and they had to amend two previously approved resolutions that had incorrect parcel numbers in them, so that was quick and easy. And we approved a conditional use permit for Bridgeview Park. They're going to put in a new ADA compliant trail. They need to bring some crushed granite in, and they need to get that in and stockpiled before the ground thaws. So it was kind of an issue that they needed to get done as soon as they could. And that was approved, and that was about it.
All right. All right, we'll move on to public hearings. The general obligation street reconstruction bonds with Ms. Robinson. And Connie, if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing at 5:39.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council. So tonight is our public hearing for the proposal to adopt a 5-year reconstruction plan and the intent to issue the $8.6 million in general obligation street reconstruction bonds. So tonight, Jessica Green from Northland Securities is here to go over that plan and answer, and then we're both here to answer any questions that you may have or that the public would have. And so right now, I'll have Jessica Green come up.
All right. Welcome.
Mayor, Council, good evening. Nice to see you all. Before you for consideration this evening, as Connie mentioned, we have a 5-year street reconstruction plan that is meant.
If you would like, you can remove your mask. If
Do you
it's
prefer that?
easier.
Is it a bit muffled?
It's up to you. I forgot to
I'm
let
comfortable
Jeanette know,
if you
so
are.
it's up to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Makes the presentation a bit easier. Okay, so you have I believe you should all have printed copies of your street reconstruction plan. This plan is meant to facilitate the financing of certain street projects that have been identified here for the city of Becker. State statute does require that a city council hold a hearing prior to the adoption of a plan to allow for public comment, review the various projects that have been identified, et cetera. I know that you've seen this plan in some of your executive sessions, so I'll plan to keep my comments pretty brief. But if it's okay with council, I'll plan to just walk through the plan pretty quickly. If you've got any questions or discussion, we can do that throughout the plan or at the end. And then, of course, open it up for any public comment that may be received by council. Does that sound like a plan?
Perfect.
Okay, so we'll start off, of course, on the first page, and that just provides just a brief introduction, just stating that the city has historically used cash to essentially maintain the streets here. At times you have issued bonds, you've issued street improvement bonds in the past, excuse me. But given the number of projects and the scope of projects that have been identified in the plan, what's being proposed currently is to issue general obligation street reconstruction bonds to finance the various projects.
In terms of statutory authority, this is section 2 of your plan. So this just references that it would be section 475.58. And this 475 is the general borrowing authority for all cities throughout Minnesota. But there is specific section here that relates to street reconstruction bonds. And statute, again, requires that the city would hold a public hearing and consider a 5-year plan for the projects that have been identified to be financed with general obligation bonds. In terms of street reconstruction, here in Minnesota, what are considered eligible improvements include, rule of thumb is just the replacement of what exists today. It does allow for turn lanes, et cetera, if you're addressing a public safety concern, but generally speaking, any sort of street widening or adding any curb and gutter where it does not exist today is not allowed under street reconstruction. But based on the projects that we've identified in the plan, it does sound like this would be mostly the replacement of streets, and again, any sort of adding of turn lanes if we're dealing with a public safety concern. So again, just working in coordination with engineering to make sure that we've identified the appropriate projects. In terms of the public hearing, 10-day notice is required for the hearing. The public hearing notice was published back on February 20th, so we are within that 10-day, it has to be published, excuse me, at least 10 days before the hearing, but not more than 28, so we're well within that range. Moving on to page 3, an item of note when it comes to street reconstruction bonds, and this is a bit different than when we're talking street improvement bonds where there's assessments. With reconstruction bonds, there is a reverse referendum component, and what that means is that the city may receive a petition, and if that petition includes signatures equal to 5% of the votes cast in the last municipal general election, that the city would have to take the issuance of bonds to an election and really get the approval of the voters to move forward. Now, there's a couple of options. So if the city were to receive a petition, you can either just stop there and not proceed with any of the projects. It would just mean that you can't move forward or bring back the same scope of work for 365 days. If you take that into an election and you receive an affirmative vote from the community, you of course can move forward at that point. Otherwise, again, you'd have a waiting period where you wouldn't be able to move forward. The third section there refers to the existing street reconstruction bonds that the city may have, and in this case, Becker has none. So that's nice and easy there. In terms of debt limit, street reconstruction bonds are subject to the city's debt limit. That being said, the city does not currently have any bonds that are subject to your debt limit, so that means that you've got quite a bit of room to borrow here. In terms of the estimated market value of the city being over $1 billion, your legal debt margin for the amount of principal that you could have outstanding is $32 million and some change. As Connie mentioned, what we're proposing here in the plan is that your not to exceed amount of borrowing is $8.6 million, so it leaves you with a lot of room there. And then if we go to the last page, it really just refers to the reconstruction projects and the cost estimate. Again, we're assuming that we've got the projects listed in the order that the city would undertake them. And there's a table on the very last page that refers to all of the projects. Now, what we've identified here is that the city would borrow no more than $8.6 million. What you've got in terms of total projects for the life of the reconstruction plan is just over $13 million. The plan does allow for some flexibility, so if you've identified a project in 25 that you want to move to 2023, you can certainly do that. The only limitation that you're sort of under here is that you can't exceed $8.6 million. If you wanted to do that, if you needed to do that, what you would need to do is essentially renotice, hold a new public hearing, and amend the plan for that amount to come up. You can certainly borrow less than that 8.6, but that 8.6 that's identified in the plan gives you the authority to borrow that much for the projects that you've identified. In terms of overall process, if the council were to move forward and approve the plan this evening, we'd have that 30-day reverse referendum window that we'd need to sort of wait it out before we start the process for issuing bonds. That being said, if that window is cleared, what we would anticipate doing is coming back before the council April 6th for a finance plan, to talk to you all about what the market looks like at that time. The bond sale wouldn't occur until I believe it's May 4th, which would get you proceeds around June 1st to start any of the construction projects that you move forward with. With that, I'm happy to take any questions that you might have or participate in any discussion. Of course, it is a public hearing, so if you'd like me to move aside, just let me know.
Yeah, I do have a question. You had said, made the comment that these bonds can't be used for curb and gutter,
Correct.
but when you do street reconstruction, you gotta redo head ramps. So we have to use a different source of financing for that, or?
So curb and gutter where none existed previously. So if it's a replacement, you're okay. Otherwise, if there are portions of the streets that have been identified in the plan where curb and gutter is going to be added, you can use other funds to support that portion. You just want to make sure that when you're looking at the specs for the actual project, that you're sort of carving those pieces out.
Okay, because I'm suspecting that we're gonna have to redo head ramps and stuff when it's
Sure.
reconstruction. Okay.
All right, anybody from the public have any questions in regards to the open hearing? I don't see any. Anything else from council? I think staff did a wonderful job, as well as the Patriot paper, on an article this last weekend addressing this. So thank you for doing that, and thanks again for staff that really laid out this whole process and what we were doing. So it's good. If there are no other questions for Ms. Green, I will go ahead and ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second.
Motion from Mike, second from Rick. Those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Aye. The public hearing is closed at 5:49. And now how will council like to proceed? In regards to resolution 2113.
I'll make a motion that we approve resolution 2113 for the street reconstruction bonds.
Okay.
I'll second.
Motion from Robin, second from Becky. Any other discussion on it? Hearing none, those in favor can state aye.
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 Opposed, carried. Thank you both. Thank you. Thank you. Board committee and consultant reports. The RFP for residential development on city-owned property with Ms. Flipson.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight before you, which I'm most excited about, we have a request for proposals for a residential development on city-owned property. So this would be the 10 acres adjacent to the golf course and community center. So the city currently owns that. We are looking to open this up to different development proposals from different developers. So a couple goals or highlights of the RFP. We're looking to create a development there for residential units that really is complementary to the amenities that are already there. We have some great assets surrounding it, so we want to be able to build off that. And with that, we do want to see an increase of investment in some inventory. We know we need some rental units. We know we need residential, single-family homes, multifamily, townhome, et cetera. So we do have quite a variety and flexibility within the RFP. So we're really excited to see what type of proposals we get back. I will note we do have one small edit from the packet, just mentioning just some water main edits, so it's really more of the technical engineering pieces. So we will get that updated prior to any release. Otherwise, just a motion and second would be appreciated to be able to release the RFP for proposals.
All right, any questions for Ms. Flipson? If not,
I'll make a motion to approve, send out for the RFP for high-density residential development for the city-owned parcel along Sherburne Avenue.
I'll second that.
motion from Rick, second from Mike. Any other discussion? Hearing none, those in favor can state aye.
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 Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Thank you. All right, administrator and staff reports. The engagement letter professional services agreement with Flaherty and Hood with Ms. Flipson.
Thank you again. Tonight before you is the professional services agreement with Flaherty and Hood, as the mayor had mentioned. So this agreement would allow us to work with Flaherty and Hood for some issues surrounding the location of the large-scale solar projects that are being proposed adjacent to our business park. So with this, there are a couple different routes that we can go in kind of collaborating with both the company and the professional services provider to work through those issues. So the attached proposal does give an overview of the services that they would be able to provide for us through that process. Our main goal would be kind of keeping our business park in a position where we'd be able to do our business park expansion, and we don't want to strand any of those assets that are currently being installed. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, a motion and second would be appreciated.
I'll make a motion to approve the professional services agreement with Flaherty and Hood.
I'll second that.
Motion from Rick, second from Mike. Any discussion on it? Hearing none, those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. All right, Marie, we're into the license agreement with the Northern States Power Company for Snuffy's Landing.
My last one, I promise. So with this, so the city has actually had a lease agreement with NSP since May of 1992. So this agreement would kind of further establish some of the rules on that Snuffy's Landing property. So since it's still owned by NSP or Xcel Energy, the city's recently been working with the Lions Club on some different projects down there. So this allows us to implement those changes in conjunction with that lease. So at this time, we would be looking for a motion and second to approve that license agreement with NSP.
I don't know that budgetary or financial impact there. That looks pretty steep.
But coming out of future improvements?
I know.
Yeah. Let's call the bond meeting again. We better.
I would make a motion to approve the license agreement with NSP for Snuffy's Landing.
I'll second.
Motion from Robin, second from Becky. Any discussion? With none, those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Consent agenda. On the consent agenda, you'll see the hiring and termination reports for the Becker Community Center and the Becker Pebble Creek Golf Club. And then there's a donations for from the Becker Lions in regards to the future Lions Park down at Snuffy's. Minnesota DVS Records Access Agreement is the annual verification for those who we require a driver's license for. It's the validation to check on that. And then the Gallagher Benefit Portal User Agreement. It's an access agreement for the website, and it'll help us on and off-board employees as they move through our employment. Memorandum of Agreement for the fire contract and the Becker Relief Association. And then the 2021-2022 Workers' Compensation Insurance Renewal.
There was no changes on what we tentatively approved for agreement in the past on that, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Make a motion, we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion from Mike, second from Rick. Any other discussion? With none, those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Payment of the bills.
Make a motion to pay the bills?
I'll second that.
Motion from Robin, second from Rick. Any discussion? With none, those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Anniversary announcements for the month of March. We have Susan, our deputy clerk, is celebrating her second year with us. Congratulations. And Miss Flipson, our community development coordinator, is celebrating 5 years with us. So congratulations to both of you. Does council have anything else for the betterment of Becker? If not, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn?
I'll second.
Motion from Rick, second from Becky. Those in favor can state aye.
Aye.
Opposed?